Greetings and welcome to Flanigan's Ecologic. I am your host, Ted Flanigan. And today we're joined by James Richmond, and we're going to talk about sailing. Sailing, one of my very favorite topics, is sailing. And James is not only an accomplished sailor, but he's also an accomplished energy manager. And he has taken his career in energy management and put it on board sailboats. And he's come up with a whole new means of solar electric propulsion that we're going to be talking about today. Delighted to have James on the show. Hey, James, welcome to Flanigan's Ecologic podcast. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Ted. You're a legend in my mind, so it's really great to have a chance to talk to you today.
I'm just delighted to have you on the show, and want to talk about sailing. Not just because it's a fun recreational thing to do, but it's a big part of your life right now. But you go way back in sailing. I read, you did a little bit of snooping around. I read that you've been sailing since you were 4 years old. Is that true?
Yeah, I've been sailing since I was 4 years old, probably not the whole time, but my dad, Randy Richmond, used to take me sailing on an El Toro on a river in Oregon, I think, when I was 4 years old. And then when I was still in my single digit years, he had a Cal 20 on the Long Island Sound, and he used to take me out racing with him when they go out on weekends on the Cal 20. And then Randy got a Ranger 29 in Massachusetts Bay when I was a young teenager, and I grew up racing with the boys on the Ranger 29. So I go way back, and my dad taught me how to sail.
You not only go way back, but that's a very interesting progression. Did you say Oregon, a river in Oregon, to Long Island Sound to Massachusetts? And I thought maybe you grew up on Coronado Island in San Diego.
No, I was born in California, but I moved 18 times before I went to college. My dad, Randy, moved around a lot because he was one of IBM's top salesmen. And they would always move him to the lowest performing branch, and then he'd make it the highest performing branch, and then they'd move him again next year. That happened my whole childhood.
How do you think that shaped you, by the way?
I don't know. I think the way that it shaped me is that ever since I got out of the house, I like to stay put where I am for a while. I don't like to move too much, although I don't really mind moving short distances now.
Yeah, no, but moving is tough. And then as a kid, I think from bouncing from school to school and meeting new friends and everything, you must have been very adaptable. But sailing became a deep passion, right?
Oh no, it's a way of life. I mean, once you're sort of brought up that way, it's a way of life. And my son has sort of picked up where I left off as well. My daughter has not, so it's not like it infects everybody in the family equally.
What would you say would be some of your favorite memories of your early sailing?
Oh, well, one of the most favorite ones was I was in my early 20s, and we raced the Nelson Merrick 41 from Marblehead to Halifax in a 3.5-day ocean race.
Wow.
And it was foggy, and we never really saw anybody the whole race. And we crossed the line at really early in the morning when it was dark out, went into the harbor and wondered where all the boats were. We won the race, first boat to finish, and first overall, the whole thing.
Wow.
That was exciting.
And why were you first? Was that your expertise, or the boat was fantastic, or both, or what?
I think it was navigation. We avoided the suction of the Bay of Fundy by sailing extra distance, and actually found better wind out there off the southern part of Nova Scotia. And a lot of other boats got sort of sucked into the Bay of Fundy in lighter air, and it allowed us to get way ahead.
Sailing is kind of magical, isn't it? In just in terms of the experienced sailors kind of know where to find the wind. I remember growing up on, Long Island and in Cold Spring Harbor, and you might think that the best wind would be right out in the middle of the harbor, but sure enough, there was old Mr. Page or Mr. Ruminier or all these Mr. Murray, all these friends, all my friends' fathers who were sailing in these little boats, and they would hug the shoreline and pick up the little wind currents, and really neat stuff.
Yeah,
Really.
local knowledge is a big part of sailboat racing, especially small boat racing, and getting out of the current if it's adverse, or getting into the current if it's going with you, is a big part of it as well.
Right, right. I like what you said about people getting infected by this. 'Cause what is it about sailing? I mean, these sailors are out there for hours and hours, right? I mean, sort of at the whimsy of the wind, and just happy as clams, right?
Yeah, it's there's just something about, well, so there's sailing and cruising, and there's the leisure part of it, and there's also sailboat racing, and you really kind of, it's two different worlds. The sailboat racing is stressful and competitive, but you get a good buzz from that. The sailboat cruising is very relaxing if you can allow yourself to just go with it, and go slowly. But once you're out on the water, you've got, like, large horizon views all around you. There's new things to see. Everybody seems to be friendly for the most part. Everybody waves at each other. It's a different world out there than it is, like, on land or on the freeway, for example.
Yeah, it really is, and it's like a backpacking trip. I told you we did a week on the coast of Maine last summer,
Yeah,
and you're off, and you don't want to take cell phone calls, and you're having this experience with nature, like you said. The pace slows down sometimes if there's a good wind. You're having a kind of an anxious time with it all, or certainly anxious picking up some of those moorings.
yeah. We just sailed a boat down from Newport Beach to Coronado, weekend before last, and it was cold weather. It wasn't really that warm out. It was early in the morning, and we were going over the La Jolla Trench, which is water that's about 400 to 600 feet deep, right off of La Jolla, and there were thousands of dolphins. Literally, like, the ocean was boiling with dolphins.
Wow.
And we also saw a whale breach 3 times in the middle of all that as well. And that's the kind of thing that just makes it worth it, is to experience that. The dolphins just swimming under the boat, the dolphins jumping up into the air, you know, making eye contact with them. It's really interesting.
Yeah, that's just something else. And I love what you said about, for the most part, people out on the water are friendly. Everybody is waving. It's just like being in Colorado, in rural Colorado. Everybody waves to one another. You're truly away from the hustle and bustle. So let's segue away from sailing for a minute, and we'll come back. But I think what happened was you had to go off to college and get serious, uh, and so off you went to the University of Michigan. Is that right?
Yeah, I actually got into engineering school first at the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut, got my grades up for the first year in engineering school, and then got admitted to the Naval Architecture program at the University of Michigan. It's one of the few places in the U.S. that has a test tank for model boats. And so they have a degree program in naval architecture and marine engineering there. And that's why I ended up in Michigan. Seems a little odd. It's freezing cold there, but that's where you go.
That's amazing. I mean, there must be very few schools that have that specialized naval architecture program.
Yeah, there's only, I think, 3 in the U.S., and University of Michigan is one of them.
And so you were thinking about designing boats at that time, or were you? I don't want to get into the propulsion yet because that's later in the story, I think.
Yeah, I decided, I was, early on when I was a kid, that I wanted to be a yacht designer because that was what my life was all about. And through the process of doing that, I became interested in solar energy and energy efficiency, because a lot of those things are related. And I wrote my thesis on an offshore floating platform that produces hydrogen from multiple renewable sources. So I called it Atlantis. So back in 1984, when I actually wrote a paper about the solar hydrogen economy and producing hydrogen offshore of seawater.
Wow. We were in very similar spheres. I might have even seen your paper. I didn't realize that there was that linkage with your marine life all the way back then, because you then went on to study solar. You got a degree at a Cabrillo College,
Yes.
and then is that when you formed your own company to start building solar systems and building energy management systems for people?
No, I went independent in 1999 when I was doing the solar energy technology degree program at Cabrillo College. I was selling solar energy as a telemarketer for solar energy at the time,
Right.
and sold the systems for domestic water heating systems. This is back in Santa Cruz. And then I was a energy auditor for PG&E and Seattle City Light and Puget Power, and did thousands of residential energy audits, either as an employee or as a contractor. And then ended up in the state of Washington, and was the coordinator for the 1991 Washington State Energy Code development. Managed the technical advisory groups that met every week for that process.
So when you went independent, as you put it, in 1999, was that what state were you in? It's hard for me to keep up geographically with you.
I was in Colorado, and at the time I was working for an electric metering company called Continental Control Systems. Prior to that, I was working for Michael and Don at Architectural Energy Corporation in Boulder.
Yeah.
And I had tried to go independent in 1997 and failed, and went back to work for CCS on their electric product, and then was able to break free finally in 1999. And I'm proud to say I've been gainfully unemployed ever since.
Well, you've done a lot of projects, so I guess it's how you spin that. But that was the Energy Solutions Network, and somehow you and I were both working on Prop 39 works. Was that part of the Energy Solutions Network, or was that a different entity?
Well, we Energy Solutions Network was the what I call my consulting company for quite some time. We started a new company in California called First Note Finance, and its purpose was really to do PACE financing. But we quickly got swept into the Prop 39 because of just the inertia of it. I just started driving around explaining to schools like how much money they had allocated to them, and they had never heard of it before. And within weeks or months, I had millions of dollars of grant work to do, and that ended up building into $40 million and 11 employees about a year and a half later. So just the pure inertia of Prop 39 just like swept us up.
What would you say were the most exciting projects then of that era?
Well, a couple of them. I worked on a number of projects where I was working for ESCOs like Trane and Siemens and Southland Industries, but with Trane in particular, we were converting entire military bases from central heating plants to distributed geothermal systems. And so I learned geothermal. I actually did a lot of the baselines for those performance contracts, installing electric metering in a lot of the buildings on electrical panels on a lot of the military bases all over the country. Another exciting project was with the Denver International Airport was building their new terminal and hotel, and I got brought in to manage the preliminary engineering to be sure that the central air conditioning plant was going to have sufficient capacity for the hotel or not.
Yeah.
That
Wow.
was that was a pretty intensive project. And then another really great project was for the Duquesne Light in Pittsburgh, where I brought in 16 sub-consultants and over about, I don't know, 8 months, did projects for continuous commissioning for the central heating plant for Pittsburgh, two of their major hospitals, and the Sears Tower, not the Sears Tower, the U.S. Steel Tower in Pittsburgh. Yeah, and that was like a fast track project where we had to like get results in less than a year before the money dried up.
Now, are we still based in Colorado at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Colorado is a good place to be a consultant from because you could get to anywhere within 2 hours on a plane.
Right. And then, I mean, as it was described in, I think, one of the articles about you and about the Ramblin Rose, the sailboat we're going to talk about next, during the pandemic, instead of taking up what needlepoint and learning to bake or eating a whole lot of food, you decided to shift and make a big shift. And I think you left your home in Colorado, moved to Coronado Island on San Diego, bought the Ramblin Rose, which is this catamaran of some note. Is that the right timing?
Well, you haven't got the timeline exactly right, but we had already been in Coronado. I ended up in Coronado to do a demand response program for the Navy and SDG&E in the, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. That program got killed by the fiscal cliff, if you remember the fiscal cliff. That was when I started the Prop 39 program. My son came out while he was still in middle school and learned how to surf one summer while I was doing that, and decided that he wanted to go to high school in Coronado. So we rented our house out in Nederland, Colorado, and moved the family to Coronado while I continued on building the Prop 39 program.
Yeah.
But then we wanted to sell the house in Colorado, and so we had to live in it for 2 years. So in 2018, we moved back to it and got it fixed up to sell. And the house was for sale when the pandemic happened. And, there wasn't a whole lot of business going on at that time. So I'd like wake up in the morning and walk down the hall. That was my commute to the office. And the first thing I do is I look at Yacht World in the morning and see what was going on Yacht World that day. And then one day I found what's now the Ramblin Rose Leopard 40 catamaran for sale. And I saw in the pictures that it was docked right near a friend's boat. So it was docked right in Coronado. So I made a call about it. Learned that it was in a charter program, and if I bought it, I could keep it in the charter program, and the boat was their biggest moneymaker in the fleet. And so I bought the boat on the spot that day, sight unseen. And that's how I ended up with the Ramblin Rose in the pandemic.
It's a good one. It's a good one, Jim. Now, you had a vision for the boat that most yacht owners wouldn't have this vision. But you decided to put a whole bunch of solar panels on the boat and a whole bunch of batteries in the boat and put in this new Ocean Volt system, these turboprops. When did you first have that notion of, I guess, replacing diesel with electric? But then the benefits go way beyond just replacing diesel with electric. When did you first have that idea?
Well, it was more of a train of thought than it was like a formulated idea. So, I knew that I wanted to put solar on a boat. And one of the reasons I was looking at a catamaran, and this catamaran in particular, is it had a lot of room to put solar panels on the boat. And so as you're researching, how to put solar panels on a boat, you get into like, well, you have to store the energy. And so you start researching the batteries, and you learn that there's different types of battery, chemistries. And I came upon, lithium batteries and then lithium iron phosphate batteries. And once I started like focusing in on the lithium iron phosphate batteries, I started realizing that people were using them for electric propulsion in boats, mostly in Europe and then a little bit on the East Coast. And so as I started researching that further, I started looking at various companies that manufactured electric propulsion. And the one that really seemed the most interesting to me was Ocean Bolt, based in Finland. And that's how I got interested in Ocean Bolt. So I called them up one day, and they put me in touch with Derek Roop, who's their CEO in the U.S., based in Connecticut. And I explained to him, I think I want to get the Ocean Bolt for this catamaran. And he's like, well, that's really great, but we don't have anybody on the West Coast or really even in Southern California at all that can handle a retrofit like that. I said, okay, well, I can do that. That was unusual for Ocean Bolt. Usually you have to go through a training program in order to be able to do that sort of thing. But since it was the pandemic, all the rules had changed.
Yeah.
So they allowed me to do it. So that's how it happened.
How many kW of solar is on the roof? You have this sun flare, thin film, flexible solar, and how many kW you have up on the deck?
It's about 1.8 kW, and the thing to understand about solar on a boat is that it's always moving, and so you need an MPPT charge controller to handle that sort of movement to get any kind of efficiency out of the solar. Additionally, on a sailboat, the panels are often shaded or partially shaded. And the other issue on a sailboat is that it's hard to get around a sailboat without walking on solar panels from time to time. So the nice thing about the sun flare panels is they're not silicon cells, so they're not brittle. They're only a micron thick, so they're flexible. They take the shape of the boat. And they have an individual bypass diode for every cell. So the cells that are lit produce and the cells that are shaded don't. And so you get the maximum efficiency out of those panels. And they're walkable and durable. So that's why I put them on the Ramblin Rose. That seemed
and then we've got, you got 1.8 kW of solar, and then that's going down and that's feeding into your batteries.
Yes.
And I think you got about 44 kWh of battery storage on board, all told.
Oh, at least, yeah. I've got, there's 4 battery banks on there, more than even when you were on the boat. There's 2 21 kilowatt hour battery banks for one for each of the 2 motors, and then there's 2 house banks which are about, I don't know, about probably about another 10 kilowatt hours each. So that's about 40 or 50, yeah.
They're powering all your instrumentation and your refrigerator and your induction cooktop stove and your.
Yeah, I put an electric stove and a microwave, a convection oven microwave. And took the propane off the boat. So the batteries and the sun have a lot to do.
Right. And in terms of the propulsion, I think the coolest thing, and obviously hats off to you for being able to do the physical work of installing these additional propellers on your boat, these turboprops on your boat, and then linking that all up with the batteries and the solar. But as I imagine it, and just very simplistically, here's a catamaran with these 2 hulls, and on the back of each hull is a motor that is dropped down into the water from the bottom of that hull, and when you need power, you can turn that motor on. There's 2 of them. You can turn them on. When you don't, they're actually generating, and you're actually going through the water. They're actually generating power, right?
Yeah, you can switch on the hydro generation, and usually that works best if you're going more than 6 knots.
Yeah.
And if you turn both of them on and there's not a lot of wind, they slow the boat down a little bit. So I've learned to sort of just use one at a time to discharge the bank that's more discharged.
Right.
But the boat's also still has its original diesel engines, and one of the modifications that I made just a few months ago is I added a 48-volt alternator to one of the diesel engines. So I can fire up the starboard diesel engine and recharge the batteries at sea with the diesels, if there's no wind or there's no sun.
If you need to, yeah, you've sort of got so you've really got a hybrid Is this a hybrid electric sailboat? Is that a way of putting it, or you have a
That's
hybrid electric propulsion?
that's the way people think of it as a hybrid, but that implies that like there's automatic switching between the two, and everything's manual, and everything's set up for maximum safety and redundancy.
Yeah.
So each electric motor has its own battery bank and is on its own network. Each diesel engine is on its own starting battery, and can operate independently of each other. So there's four-way redundancy in the propulsion system on the boat.
But you've really proven with this boat, and you've had an AEE article on it. You've had lots of press. You've proven that you can replace a diesel propulsion system on a recreational sailboat, right? And have a number of spin-off benefits. And one is you sort of decarbonize your all of your equipment, your kitchen equipment, everything has been swapped out as well.
Yeah, I got to add a water maker next. That's to really make the thing a blue water cruiser. It needs a water maker, so that's really the next project. That's the next $5,000 I have to bite off.
Well, is the boat for sale now? I looked on your website and it looked like maybe it was for sale. It looked like you had a plan to shift to a monohull.
Yeah, I bought a monohull. I got it. I was offered a slip at Coronado Yacht Club, and I got the boat. That's the one we sailed down from Newport Beach a couple weekends ago. So now I have two boats, and two sets of expenses, to pay. But the Ramblin Rose is for sale. An unexpected outcome of the Ramblin Rose being for sale is that lots of people are looking at it, and it's getting way more exposure than before, because it's being advertised on Yacht World, and all the yacht brokers are looking at it because catamarans are rare in Southern California. So even if I don't sell the Ramblin Rose, I may keep it for sale forever, because it's a great marketing tool.
Yeah, and it's a proof of a concept, absolutely. And you are now in the business, the Sunwater Marine. I know you have the boat now. The boats plural, but which would be chartered, but Sunwater Marine, you're in the business of consulting others that might want to do the same thing, decarbonize, their boats, right, and put in this Ocean Volt system or some similar solar electric systems.
Yeah, so I'm the dealer for Ocean Volt of Finland, and Sunwater Marine is also a worldwide distributor for Sunflare, and so far that's all well and good. We haven't made money doing that. I'm still working in the energy industry, to pay the bills. But I've always been early to the party. When this thing breaks open, it's going to break open fast, and I want to be first there. So here we are.
Yeah, well, congratulations for being an early to the party guy. In this case, you've really laid out a whole vision. I'll never forget sailing with you, and then we had light wind and we needed to come about. And you just said, well, just goose the motor on that, I guess the starboard side, and all this, which kind of was a whole different sailing experience for me. But you've transformed how a boat like that could operate, and really proven that it's possible. So
especially in light air, which is pretty prevalent in San Diego, having electric motors they're silent. First of all, you can barely hear them, if at all. And by just moving the boat forward a little bit through the light air, you actually make your own apparent wind, and that's pulling the boat along sailing, whereas otherwise it would just be sitting there flopping.
Amazing. Hey, Jim, thanks so much for this time together. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, great hanging with you, Ted. See ya.
Bye-bye. That's it. Thanks for listening to Flanigan's Ecologic. We'll see you next time.